Health of the Lord and blessings of the Holy Spirit. Welcome, class. It's Teacher Marin. My lesson for today is related to literature. This literature is entitled The Whistle by Benjamin Franklin. Before we get to the short story about the whistle, let us get to know about the author first, knowing a little about his background. Among the leading intellectuals of his time, Franklin was an American polymath who was active as a writer, scientist, inventor, statesman, diplomat, printer, publisher, and a political philosopher. He was one of the founding fathers of the United States, a drafter and signer of the United States Declaration of Independence, and the first United States Postmaster General. As a scientist, he was a major figure in the American Enlightenment and the history of physics for his studies of electricity. And as an inventor, he is known for the lightning rod, bifocals, and the Franklin stove, among others. Benjamin founded many civic organizations, including the Library Company, Philadelphia's first fire department, and the University of Pennsylvania. Franklin earned the title of the first American for his early and indefatigable campaigning for colonial unity, and as an author and spokesman in London for several colonies. He was born in Milk Street, Boston, Massachusetts on January 17, 1706, and baptized at All South Meeting House. As a child, growing up along the Charles River, Franklin recalled that he was generally the leader among the boys. Okay, now let's proceed to the short story, The Whistle. The Whistle is a parabolic short story come letter penned on the 10th of November 1779 by American founding father Benjamin Franklin. Franklin wrote this literary piece at the age of 73 to Anne-Louis Brillion de Joy. So who is Anne-Louis Brillion de Joy? Anne-Louis Brillion de Joy was a French musician and a composer in the 1777. She composed the Marche des Insurgents, or the March of the Insurgents, to celebrate an American victory in the American Revolutionary War. The story of the whistle is told to her by Benjamin Franklin as Madame Brilliant, love stories, and since he was writing to her after a very long time, he thought he might share this story of his childhood with her. It begins with Franklin apologizing to Madame Brilliant for not answering her previous two Wednesday and Saturday correspondence. Since she had received another of her letters this Wednesday, he felt compelled and beholden to answer her letters. Franklin also mentions that his husband, Mr. B. or Monsieur Brilliant, had kindly sent him word that he was setting out to return to Madame Brilliant. It indicates that her husband wanted at least one letter from Franklin to carry to his wife. Therefore, Franklin finally sat down to write a letter to Madame Brilliant despite being indolent and averse to writing. This is not particularly true because Benjamin Franklin loved to write. Probably he is trying to indicate here that he was somewhat tardy in his correspondence. So, let's proceed to reading the short story. When I was 7 years old, my friends in a holiday filled my pockets with coppers. I went directly to a shop where they sold toys for children, and being charmed with the sound of whistle that I met by the way in the hands of another boy, I voluntarily offered and gave all my money for one. I then came home and went whistling all over the house, much pleased with my whistle but disturbing all the family. My brothers and sisters and cousins, understanding the bargain I had made, told me I had given 4 times as much for what it was worth. They put me in mind of what good things might have bought with the rest of my money, and laughed at me so much for my folly that I cried with vexation, and the reflection gave me more chagrin than the whistle gave me pleasure. This, however, was afterwards of use to me, the impression continuing on my mind, so that often when I was tempted to buy some unnecessary things, I said to myself, "Don't give too much for the whistle," and I saved my money. As I grew up, went out into the world and observed the actions of men, I thought I met with many, very many, who gave too much for the whistle. When I saw one too ambitious of court favor, sacrificing his time, his repose, his liberty, his virtue, and perhaps his friends to attain it, I said to myself, this man gives too much for his whistle. When I saw another fond of popularity, constantly employing himself in political bustles, neglecting his own affairs, and ruining them by that neglect, he pays indeed, said I, too much for his whistle. If I knew a miser who gave up every kind of comfortable living, all pleasures of doing good to others, all esteem of his fellow citizens, and the joys of benevolent friendship for the sake of accumulating wealth, poor man, said I, you pay too much for your whistle. When I met with a man of pleasure, sacrificing every laudable improvement of the mind or of his fortune to mere corporeal sensations, and ruining his health in their pursuit, mistaken man, said I, you are proving pain for yourself. Instead of pleasure, you give too much for your whistle. If I see one fond of appearance or fine clothes, fine houses, fine furniture, fine equipages all above his fortune, for which he contracts debts and ends his career in a prison, alas, say I, he has paid dear, very dear for his whistle. When I see a beautiful, sweet-tempered girl married to an ill-natured brute husband, what a pity, say I, that she should pay so much for a whistle. In short, I conceive that a great part of the miseries of mankind are brought upon them by the false estimate they had made of the value of things and by their giving too much for their whistles. Yet I ought to have a charity for these unhappy people when I consider that, with all this wisdom of which I am boasting, there are certain things in the world so tempting. For example, the apples of King John, which happily are not both, for if they were to be put to sale by auction, I might very easily be led to ruin myself in the purchase, and find that I had once more given too much for the whistle. Benjamin narrates the whistle story which procured when he was a lad of 7 years with the help of several copper coins, given to him by his friends when he was on holiday. With all the money, he bought the mere whistle. His family, brothers, sisters, and cousins derided him from his actions, saying that he had paid 4 times the sum of an actual worthless whistle. They also tried to make him feel horrid by reminding him that if he had thought correctly and only paid the sum of the whistle to the shopkeeper and nothing more, he could have bought so many other beautiful things. This example would always remain with him all his life. After, he was never tempted to buy unnecessary stuff while young, reminding himself of the money he had paid for the whistle. As he grew older and wiser, he realized that everyone he met always paid more than required for their whistles. In other words, they were giving more importance to things, people, sad places that needed the least priority in their life. So he speaks about the 6 categories of people who pay too much for the whistle. The first one is a person ambitious of court favor used to spend too much attending at the court. He gave up his repose, freedom or liberty, virtue and good values and friends to attain favor at the court. The second one is a person who found of popularity regularly engaged in political bustles, neglecting his affairs. It indicates that a person who always likes to live in the limelight but forgets the most important people. Third one is the example of a miser who gives up every kind of comfortable living, the pleasures of doing good to others. This point is that his fellow citizens' esteem and the joys of warm friendship in his pursuit of wealth, but his wealth never gave him happiness on its own. Next is a man of pleasure who gives in to his corporeal senses and ruins his health in its pursuit. And a man of good appearance who is handsome, wears fine clothes, lives in a fine house, has the best furniture, good fortunes and equipages, but goes into debt for it all and lands in prison. And lastly, the example of sweet-tempered girl who marries an ill-tempered brute pays too much for her whistle by selecting the wrong husband. This last example is something that even Mom Brilliant could relate to because she knew as a woman what it meant to be married to a terrible husband. There were plenty of them in her time. The short calm letter ends on a happy note, but Franklin had made his point clear on heaven and the afterlife. The point is that one needed to live a good life and be at peace to know that the person's afterlife would be secure. The lesson that we can get from this short story is that we should think twice and choose wisely to whichever decisions that we have in life in order for us to not regret after. We should practice self-respect and self-discipline. So this is the end of our short story. Thank you for listening and watching. See you!